The desert sun beat mercilessly on Nellis Air Force Base, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage. Rows of fighter jets stood in formation, their wings glinting like the blades of 1,000 swords ready for battle. Among them was the sleek, predatory shape of the F-22 Raptor, the crown jewel of American air dominance. To the untrained eye, they looked identical machines of war, waiting for their masters. But to her, each jet carried its own personality, quirks and temperaments, like untamed stallions that only a few could truly ride. Captain Alexandra Hayes, known simply as Alex to her peers, had been one of those few. From the day she earned her wings, she'd outflown expectations, outmaneuvered rivals, and outlasted training regimes designed to break even the strongest. Pilots respected her skill, but not everyone respected her voice. That voice had gotten her into trouble. It began during a night training exercise 3 months earlier. She had been scheduled to fly a standard sortie with 3 other Raptors, a routine dogfight simulation against aggressor F-16s. Everything was normal until her weapons system glitched mid-simulation. A warning light on her console blinked red critical fault. Her radar, the lifeline of any pilot, was feeding her false targets. In combat, that would have been a death sentence. She reported it immediately. Her squadron leader, Major Grissom, dismissed it as pilot error. Stay on mission. His voice barked through the headset. But she knew better. Alex had flown hundreds of hours in the Raptor. She could feel when the machine was lying. Instead of ignoring it, she pulled the jet out of formation and returned to base, defying direct orders. It was a decision that saved her life. Hours later, technicians confirmed what she already knew: the system had failed. If she'd pressed forward, she might have misfired on friendly aircraft, or worse, flown blind against real threats. Alex thought her actions would vindicate her. She thought she'd be thanked for preventing a potential disaster. Instead, she was called insubordinate. "You don't make that decision," Grissom had told her in front of the squadron, his voice sharp as a knife. "You follow orders. Always," she tried to argue. She reminded him that their lives depended on recognizing faults in the system, that blind obedience could get them killed. But her words only dug the hole deeper. To challenge a commanding officer, even with truth on your side, was to invite punishment. And punishment came swiftly. Within weeks, she was pulled from rotation. Her flight hours evaporated. The cockpit she loved was replaced by a desk in a sterile administrative office where she filled out forms, tracked maintenance logs, and watched others fly the skies that once belonged to her. Her badge still said pilot, but she felt more like a prisoner. The whispers started soon after. She thinks she's smarter than command. Washed out. Grounded for good. Alex ignored them at first, focusing on small victories, perfectly filed reports, minor maintenance fixes, anything to stay connected to the jets. But the ache in her chest grew heavier each day she watched others soar without her. Then came the final blow. She was summoned to a private meeting with Colonel Peters, the base commander. He didn't mince words. "Captain Hayes, you're being reassigned. Effective immediately." Her stomach dropped. "You're being transferred to a desk position in D.C. Consider it. A better fit for your skills." It wasn't just reassignment. It was exile. A polite way of stripping her wings without the paperwork of dishonorable discharge. Alex stared at him, searching for some sliver of understanding in his face, but found none. Peter's tone was calm, almost rehearsed. To him, she wasn't a decorated pilot or a warrior who had risked everything in the sky. She was a problem. "Sir, with all due respect," she said, her voice trembling with restrained fury, "this isn't about fit. It's about silencing me." The colonel didn't respond. He only slid the transfer papers across the desk. She signed them because she had no choice. The next morning, She stood outside the gates of Nellis with a single duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The desert wind whipped against her uniform. Behind her, the raptors roared in the distance, a sound that once filled her with pride, but now felt like a cruel reminder. For the first time in her career, Alex was grounded, not by mechanical failure, not by enemy fire, but by politics. She thought of the call sign she had earned years ago, Valkyrie. It wasn't just a nickname. It had been her identity, a symbol of the fearless warrior who carried others into battle. Yet now, stripped of her place in the sky, Valkyrie felt like a ghost. As the bus pulled up to take her away, she caught her reflection in its tinted windows. She looked like a soldier without a war, a pilot without wings. But in her heart, she knew something the colonel didn't. Legends weren't erased by paperwork. Somewhere, sometime, the skies would call her back. And when they did, Valkyrie would rise again, not for herself, but for the warriors who needed her most. For now, though, she walked onto that bus carrying nothing but silence and the bitter taste of unfinished battles. Her exile had begun. The memory was burned into her mind like entrails across a clear sky. It had been 2 years earlier, long before her exile, when she was still one of the youngest pilots to ever fly the F-22 Raptor. She had trained for this moment, drilled endlessly, yet nothing could have prepared her for the night that would define her future and give birth to a name that would echo in hangars and briefing rooms for years. It was the final stage of Red Flag, the Air Force's most grueling combat simulation. Pilots from across the world had gathered at Nellis, bringing their best fighters and their sharpest skills. Red Flag wasn't a game, it was a crucible. Fail there, and you weren't trusted in real battle. Alex sat in the cockpit of her Raptor, her helmet heavy on her head, sweat forming under the visor despite the cool desert air. Her hands rested on the controls with a familiarity born of obsession. She loved this jet. To outsiders, it was just metal and circuits. But to her, it breathed, it responded. It challenged her like a dance partner that demanded perfection. The exercise called for a massive simulated dogfight. Raptors against aggressor squadrons flying F-16s and F-18s. She was the youngest pilot on her side, slotted into a 4-ship formation under Major Grissom's command. "Keep tight, Valkyrie." His voice crackled over comms, already using the call sign that hadn't yet become hers officially. At the time, it was more of a teasing nickname thrown around in training, inspired by her obsession with Norse mythology. "Don't make me babysit you." "Copy, lead," she replied, her voice steady, hiding the adrenaline rushing in her veins. They climbed higher, their formation slicing through the night sky. Radar screens lit up with enemy blips, dozens of them. The aggressor squadron was throwing everything they had. The first engagement was chaos. Missiles locked, warning tones screamed, and jets banked hard, weaving trails of fire and smoke. Alex stayed calm, dodging missile locks with precision, firing back when she had clear shots. She scored her first simulated kill within minutes. Her missile, hitting an F-16, it spiraled out of the exercise. But then it happened. Her jet shuddered violently. Warning lights erupted across her console. The radar display, the lifeblood of an F-22 pilot, froze, then flickered with false contacts. Her jet was blind. "Raptor 3, status?" Grissom demanded. "Radar failure. Possible system crash," Alex answered, fighting to steady her breathing. "An eject from the fight. You're dead weight now. Dead weight." The words cut sharper than shrapnel. She looked out the canopy. Her squadron was outnumbered. 2 Raptors already killed. Without her, they'd be flying blind against overwhelming odds. Training protocol demanded she exit, return to base, and log the failure. But her instincts screamed another truth. If she left, the mission was over. Her pulse quickened. She remembered every hour in the simulator, every lesson drilled into her by instructors who had long since given up on expecting surprises. But Alex had always been different. She believed the jet was more than its screens and systems. She believed in flying by feel, by instinct, by trust. "Negative," she said into the comms. "I can still fight." "Highs, that's an order." She cut the channel, shutting out Grissom's voice. For the next 15 minutes, she flew without radar. She relied on her eyes, on the faint silhouettes against the stars, on the gut feeling of where an enemy might appear. She pushed the Raptor to the edge of its capabilities, executing maneuvers that risked stalling the aircraft, banking so sharply that her body strained against the G-forces until her vision narrowed. At one point, an F-16 locked onto her, its missile tone shrieking in her headset. Instead of fleeing, she rolled inverted, dove straight down, and cut engines for a split-second, an insane move that made her jet vanish from radar. The enemy overshot, and when she reignited the engines, she came up beneath him, locking on and scoring another kill. The control tower fell silent as officers watched her feed. She wasn't flying by rules anymore. She was flying like she'd been born for the skies. By the end of the exercise, her Raptor had scored 4 confirmed kills and survived against overwhelming odds. No one could explain how she'd done it. When she landed, drenched in sweat, ground crew swarmed the jet, checking for faults. Major Grissom stormed toward her, his face red with fury. "You disobeyed direct orders," he shouted as she removed her helmet. "Yes, sir," she replied calmly, her eyes unflinching. "You could have crashed. You could have cost us the exercise. But I didn't," she countered, her tone steady. "And you still had 3 Raptors in the sky instead of 2. That wasn't luck. That was choice." Grissom opened his mouth to argue, but another voice interrupted. Colonel Peters, the base commander, had been watching from the control tower. "That wasn't choice," he said, his tone carrying across the tarmac. "That was instinct. And damn good flying." The next day, during the debrief, Peters made it official. "She flies like the shield maiden of old," he said to the room, a faint smile breaking his usually stoic face. "She doesn't retreat. She doesn't break. From this day forward, her call sign is Valkyrie." The word carried weight in the room. In Norse legend, the Valkyries were warriors who chose who lived and died in battle, guiding the souls of the fallen to Valhalla. For Alex, the name meant something more. It was a reminder that she would never abandon her comrades, that she would fight until the end, radar or no radar. From that day forward, no one called her Haze in the Skies. She was Valkyrie. The name followed her through every mission, every briefing, every drill. Pilots whispered it with respect, sometimes envy. To the younger cadets, it became a story they told in hushed tones. The woman who fought blind and still won. But names were a double-edged sword. They carried honor, but they also carried expectations. And for Alex, they painted a target on her back. Major Grissom never forgave her for disobeying him, even though her actions had earned the squadron's respect. To him, Valkyrie was a reminder that he had been defied in front of his men. Alex didn't care. She wore the call sign proudly, stitching it across her helmet, her flight suit, even the patch she kept on her duffel bag. It wasn't just a title, it was her truth. And even now, years later, standing in exile with her wings stripped away, she clung to that memory. Because no matter what papers the colonel signed, no matter how many offices they tried to bury her in, she knew what she was. She was Valkyrie, and legends don't fade. The ocean was never silent. Even hundreds of miles offshore, the low rumble of waves crashing against the steel hull of the USS George Washington was constant, like a heartbeat. On the flight deck above, aircraft engines roared, their echoes rolling across the Pacific night. But deep inside the carrier, in a briefing room marked classified access only, the Navy's most elite warriors were gathered around a glowing map. The Navy SEALs didn't ask for help often. They weren't the type to admit vulnerability. On land, they were shadows. In the water, they were ghosts. They had toppled dictators, raided terrorist compounds, and extracted hostages from hellholes where no sane man would dare step. Their motto, "The only easy day was yesterday," was more than words. It was truth written in blood and scars. But this mission was different. Commander Nathan Cole, a grizzled veteran of 2 decades, stood at the front of the room. His eyes were sharp, his jaw set, his hair clipped to regulation but already streaked with gray. He didn't waste time with theatrics. He simply tapped the map where a red zone glowed like a wound. "Enemy territory," he said flatly. "Densely defended. Mobile SAMs. Radar coverage tighter than Fort Knox. The target is here." He zoomed in. A cluster of warehouses sat near the coastline. "Our intel confirms the site is a staging ground for stolen missile technology. If those warheads make it to the black market, we'll be dealing with a nightmare scenario. Our mission is to get in, secure intel, and extract before dawn. On the ground, we're ready, but in the air..." He paused, looking at his men. "That's where we've got a problem." The room went quiet. Everyone knew what he meant. Over the past month, they'd run simulations with multiple Air Force pilots providing overwatch. Each time, the results had been the same: failure. The pilots were competent, textbook perfect, even but too slow, too cautious. They treated the skies like a chessboard, when what the SEALs needed was a knife fight. During the last run, an entire SEAL squad had been wiped out in simulation because their air support failed to neutralize threats quickly enough. Cole slammed the fist against the table. "I'm not sending you into a meat grinder because someone in a cockpit doesn't have the guts to improvise. We need someone who thinks like us, fast, ruthless, unpredictable." A younger SEAL, Lieutenant Ramirez, leaned forward. "With respect, sir, we've tested every pilot they've offered us. None of them measure up. What are we supposed to do, fly the damn Raptors ourselves?" A ripple of dry laughter moved through the room, but Cole didn't laugh. His gaze stayed fixed on the map. "No," he said quietly, "we find someone different. Someone who doesn't fly by the manual." That's when the name surfaced. It came from an unexpected voice, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hawley, a veteran operator who rarely spoke in meetings. He had been stationed at Nellis once, years back, during a joint training exercise. He remembered the stories whispered across hangars. The name passed from pilot to pilot like a secret. "What about Valkyrie?" he asked. The room shifted. "Valkyrie?" Ramirez frowned. "That's some kind of calcine?" Hawley nodded slowly. "Yeah, F-22 pilot. Supposedly pulled off maneuvers that no one thought were possible. Saved her entire squadron during Red Flag when our systems went down. Flew blind and still came out on top." Another SEAL scoffed. "Sounds like a war story. Probably exaggerated." But Hawley shook his head. "I saw the footage. It wasn't exaggeration. She was the real deal. The kind of pilot who doesn't just support you. She changes the battlefield." Commander Cole's eyes narrowed. "If she's that good, why haven't we heard of her before? Where is she now?" Hawley hesitated, then shrugged. "That's the thing. Last I heard, she got pushed out. Politics, maybe. Command didn't like her attitude. Some said she was too independent." Cole leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. He'd worked with enough warriors to know the type. Sometimes the most dangerous fighters weren't the ones who polished boots or saluted sharpest. Sometimes they were the ones who broke rules, because rules weren't fast enough to save lives. He tapped the table again. "Find her." 2 weeks later, in a cramped Pentagon office where fluorescent lights hummed and paper stacks grew like Weeds, Captain Alexandra Hayes stared at her computer screen, trying not to think about the jets roaring in the skies she no longer touched. Her exile in D.C. was as suffocating as she'd feared. Endless reports, pointless meetings, coffee that tasted like burned rubber. She felt like a lion locked in a cage. Every day, she reminded herself not to look at the sky too long, not to imagine the feel of the Raptor's controls in her hands. That's when the door opened. Two men in dark uniforms stepped in, their presence filling the room instantly. Not Air Force, Navy. And not just Navy, something in their posture, their eyes, told her these weren't desk jockeys. They were SEALs. Captain Hayes? The taller one asked. Alex set down her pen, wary. That's me. He extended a folder toward her. Commander Cole, we've been looking for you. She raised an eyebrow. Congratulations. You found me. What do you want? Cole studied her for a beat, as if weighing her worth without needing words. Finally, he opened the folder and slid a photo across her desk. It was grainy satellite imagery of a coastal compound bristling with defenses. We have a mission. High risk, high stakes. We need someone in the sky who can do more than follow procedure. We need someone who can improvise, someone who can keep up with us. Alex leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. And you think that's me? Cole's voice was steady. We don't think. We know. Your name came up in every conversation. Valkyrie. The word hit her like a punch to the chest. She hadn't heard it in months, not since the day she was thrown out, her call sign stripped from her like it meant nothing. To hear it spoken now, from the lips of men who didn't even belong to her branch, was surreal. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she smirked, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of pain. Funny, the Air Force didn't seem to think Valkyrie was worth keeping around. Cole's gaze didn't waver. Maybe the Air Force forgot what matters. We haven't. The room went quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic outside. Alex felt the weight of the folder in her hands, the weight of possibility. For months she'd been grounded, silenced, stripped of purpose. Now, out of nowhere, the most elite warriors in the U.S. military were asking for her, not out of pity. Not out of politics, out of respect. Her heartbeat quickened. The skies were calling her back. The C-130's engines droned like a storm, trapped inside metal walls. Captain Alexandra Hayes sat in one of the webbed seats along the fuselage, her duffel bag between her boots, helmet case balanced on her lap. The interior smelled of fuel, sweat, and steel, a mixture she had missed more than she cared to admit. She hadn't flown in nearly a year. Not since her reassignment, not since Colonel Peters had signed away her wings. For months, she had been just another uniform at a desk, a number in a system designed to erase troublemakers. But now, because of a whispered call sign and a desperate team of SEALs, she was being pulled back into the skies. It felt surreal. Across from her, Commander Cole sat with his arms crossed, watching her with the same unflinching intensity he had in the Pentagon office. He hadn't wasted words on the flight. Neither had she. Still, she could feel the questions radiating from the SEALs around them. Some eyed her with open skepticism, others with curiosity. She knew what they were thinking. That's her? That's the Valkyrie? Alex had dealt with doubt before. She almost preferred it. Underestimation was fuel. The plane touched down at Naval Air Station North Island, and within an hour, she found herself stepping onto the edge of the SEALs' compound. It wasn't like the Air Force bases she'd known. There were no rows of fighter jets glinting in the sun, no parades of uniforms marching in time. This was raw, functional, stripped down. Trucks lined with gear. Obstacle courses that looked like medieval torture racks. And men hard-eyed, quiet, carrying the aura of those who had seen things no one else could imagine. Her arrival drew stares. Not hostile, but appraising. Cole led her through the compound until they reached the hangar where her Raptor waited. The sight hit her like a punch to the lungs. The jet gleamed under the fluorescent lights, sleek and lethal, as if it had been waiting for her. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed the smell of hydraulic oil, the metallic tang of the hangar air. "Your bird's been tuned and checked," Cole said. "You'll run with us tomorrow at 0500. First joint exercise." Alex nodded, trying to keep her voice even. Understood. But as she set her helmet case down and ran her hand along the Raptor's fuselage, she couldn't stop the rush of emotion. This wasn't just metal. This was freedom, redemption, purpose. That night, she sat alone in the temporary quarters they'd assigned her. The room was Spartan, just a bunk, a desk, and a locker, but she didn't need luxury. She needed clarity. She opened her helmet case and stared at it. The black visor reflected her face back at her, older now, hardened. Across the side, her call sign was painted in bold white, Valkyrie. She traced the letters with her fingertips. The last time she'd worn it, she had walked off a base in disgrace. Now, it was being resurrected by men who barely knew her, who believed in a legend more than in the woman herself. Was she still that pilot? Could she still fly like before, with instinct sharper than radar, with nerves steadier than steel? Or had exile dulled her edge? She clenched her fists. There was only one way to find out. The next morning, the SEALs assembled on the tarmac for the briefing. The mission was just a simulation, but the tension was real. Cole laid it out: insertion into hostile airspace, ground team navigating a complex, Valkyrie providing cover. When Alex walked into the briefing room in her flight suit, the chatter died instantly. Every head turned. She could feel their skepticism like heat on her skin. These were men who didn't bow to anyone, who measured respect in blood and sweat. To them, she was an outsider. Worse, a disgraced one. Cole didn't bother with introductions. He simply gestured toward her. "This is Captain Hayes. Calcine Valkyrie. She's your eye in the sky." The room stayed silent, and a voice from the back cut through. "Thought they threw her out." A ripple of laughter followed. Alex's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she met their stares head on. "They did," she said evenly. "And yet here I am. So either I'm damn good, or you're all desperate. Either way, I'll keep you alive." The laughter died. For the first time, she saw something shift in their eyes. Not respect, not yet, but curiosity. Minutes later, she was strapping into the cockpit. The canopy lowered, sealing her inside the machine she had missed like a lost limb. She ran through the pre-flight checks, fingers dancing over switches, her body falling into rhythm like muscle memory had been waiting all along. Her heart hammered as the engines roared to life. The Raptor shivered beneath her, eager to fly. "Valkyrie, systems green," the tower confirmed. She smiled faintly beneath her visor. Home. The SEALs transport helicopters lifted off first, heading toward the training zone. She followed, climbing higher, her Raptor cutting through the morning sky with a scream of raw power. Every nerve in her body lit up. She was alive again. On the comms, Cole's voice came steady. "Let's see what you've got, Valkyrie." The simulation began. Hostile drones lit up her radar, moving to intercept the helicopters. Without hesitation, she dove. Missiles streaked from her wings, striking targets before the SEALs even called for support. Her maneuvers were sharp, ruthless, unpredictable. On the ground, SEAL operators paused mid-movement, watching their radar feeds as enemy threats vanished almost before they appeared. "Holy hell," Ramirez muttered. "She's fast." "No," Halle corrected. "She's perfect." Alex didn't hear them. She was too focused, too immersed in the rhythm of combat. She moved like the Valkyrie of legend, descending from the skies to shield warriors below. By the time the simulation ended, the SEALs had completed their mission with 0 losses, a first in weeks of training. When her Raptor touched down, she climbed from the cockpit, sweat dripping down her back, adrenaline still roaring in her veins. The SEALs stood waiting. They didn't cheer. They didn't clap. That wasn't their way. But as she passed, one by one, they straightened their postures, their eyes following her with something new. Not acceptance. Not yet. But the first spark of respect. That night, as Alex lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, she felt something she hadn't in months. Belonging. She had been thrown off base, humiliated, stripped of her wings. But today, in the eyes of America's most elite warriors, she had begun to carve her place, back not through politics, not through approval, but through action. Tomorrow would bring harder tests. She knew that. The SEALs would push her, doubt her, maybe even try to break her. But for the first time since exile, she welcomed the fight, because Valkyrie had returned to the skies, and she wasn't going back to the ground. The hangar smelled of salt water and jet fuel the next morning. Dawn was barely breaking over Coronado, and the compound buzzed with quiet intensity. The SEALs moved with a disciplined fluidity, shouldering gear, checking weapons, exchanging clipped words that only warriors fluent in each other's rhythms could understand. Alexandra Hayes stood slightly apart, her helmet tucked under her arm. Her flight suit was crisp, her boots polished, her posture straight. Yet she felt every set of eyes on her, measuring her like a sniper, sighting in on a target. To them, she was an outsider. Worse, an interloper dragged back from exile. Commander Cole strode into the briefing room, his presence alone silencing the low chatter. The operator shifted into attention as he gestured toward the projection screen. The map of the exercise zone lit up a stretch of desert scrub simulated as hostile territory, with enemy drones, ground fire, and comms jammers programmed to harass the team. Objective is to penetrate the zone, secure the building, extract the package, and exfil with minimal detection, Cole said. His voice carried a weight that brooked no argument. Support will come from above. He turned, eyes landing on Alex. Your eye in the sky. Captain Hayes. Calcine Valkyrie. The silence was heavy. Alex met their stares, keeping her chin high. A tall SEAL in the back hail, if she remembered right, snorted. So the brass dusted off a ghost and handed her the stick again. What happens when the comms cut out and she freezes? We get lit up? A few of the men chuckled. The sound was low, sharp, more knife than humor. Cole didn't intervene. He let the challenge hang. This was their way. Trial by fire, respect earned not from rank or reputation, but through performance. Alex's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. If I freeze, she said evenly, then you'll have time to complain on the way to the hospital. Until then, maybe try keeping up. The laughter died. Hale's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation, and something else, interest. The exercise began at dawn. The SEALs loaded into their helos, rotors chopping the morning air into violent rhythm. Alex's Raptor sat waiting, predatory and sleek, the kind of machine that turned disbelief into awe the second it took off. Strapping into the cockpit felt like slipping into a second skin. Her fingers moved over switches, the canopy sealed with a hiss, and for a moment, all the noise faded. She wasn't a cast-off officer anymore. She wasn't the woman humiliated by politics. She was Valkyrie. Valkyrie, this is Overlord. Systems green, you are cleared for launch. Copy, Overlord, she replied, voice calm. Valkyrie rolling. The engine screamed, the Raptor surged down the runway, and the world fell away beneath her wings. The SEALs advanced across the desert in their helicopters, boots hitting sand as they disembarked. Almost immediately, The simulation's threats came alive. Drones swept in low, designed to harass their formation. Contact, 12 o'clock. Hale barked over comes. But before the drones could lock on, two streaks of fire tore across the sky. Missiles slammed into the machines, reducing them to smoking debris that fell harmlessly into the sand. Threat neutralized. Alex's voice cut in, calm, measured. Eyes up, gents. The operators exchanged glances. Jesus, Ramirez muttered. She nailed them before my HUD even flagged the targets. She guessed, Hale said quickly, refusing to concede ground. But his tone had lost some of its edge. Minutes later, as the team pushed deeper into the zone, simulated ground fire erupted from hidden emplacements. Normally, such an ambush would slow the team, force them to crawl and maneuver. But overhead, Valkyrie's Raptor screamed into a dive. "Valkyrie engaging," she called, her voice steady even as her jet pulled maneuvers that defied physics. Her cannon chewed through the enemy positions with pinpoint precision, dust clouds rising in her wake. On the ground, Cole raised a hand, signaling the team forward. "Cover's clear. Move." The SEALs surged ahead, unhindered. "Not bad," Ramirez admitted, panting as they reached the next ridge. "Not bad?" Hale snapped, though his eyes flicked skyward where her jet banked overhead, sharp and flawless. "She's reckless. She cuts it too close." Yet even he couldn't hide the grudging respect edging into his voice. The exercise built toward its climax at the simulated compound. The SEALs approached under heavy, hostile fire drones, mock SAM sights, even a Combs blackout meant to disorient them. For a moment, the operation teetered on collapse. Then Valkyrie dove in. She broke formation, cut through the jamming fields, and executed a maneuver no sane pilot would attempt, threading her Raptor between two narrow canyons, using the walls to shield her jet while unleashing ordnance at the enemy emplacements. From the ground, the SEALs looked up in stunned silence as the sky erupted in controlled firepower. Their feeds cleared, their comms snapped back, and the enemy positions vanished from the board. "Package secure," Cole reported minutes later as they swept the building. "Exfil route is clean," Alex replied, calm, like she hadn't just bent the laws of aerodynamics. Back at the compound, the debriefing room was thick with silence. The SEALs filed in, sweat streaking their faces, sand still clinging to their uniforms. They sat, staring at the woman across the table. No one laughed now. Cole finally broke the silence. "0 casualties. Fastest time on record for this scenario. That's what happens when ground and air move like one." He looked at Alex. "You've set a new bar." For a long moment, the room stayed quiet. Then Hale leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You still fly reckless," he muttered. But then he added, grudgingly, "Reckless works." A ripple of agreement passed through the room. Small nods, subtle shifts in posture, but unmistakable. The spark of respect had ignited. That night, as Alex sat outside her quarters, listening to the crash of distant waves, she let the memory replay. The looks on their faces. The silence broken not by ridicule, but by acknowledgement. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it was the first step. The SEALs measured people in blood and grit, and today she had proven she could fly for them, the way they fought for each other, with precision, with fury, with absolute commitment. And though tomorrow would bring harder tests, for tonight she let herself savor the smallest of triumphs. The outcast had been heard, and Valkyrie was no longer a ghost. The desert sun beat down like a hammer, searing the horizon into waves of shifting heat. At first glance, it was just another training day, another rehearsal in the never-ending grind of preparation. But everyone on the compound felt the tension humming beneath the surface. Today's exercise wasn't scripted. Cole had warned them during the briefing. Command is cutting us loose. Real-time variables, live fire, will be tested on improvisation. That meant anything could happen. No predictable routes, no enemy positions marked neatly on the map. For the SEALs, it was routine chaos. For Alex, it was something else entirely. It was her chance or her grave. She strapped into her Raptor, sweat slicking her palms despite the cool interior. The helmet sealed around her head, HUD flickering to life. Outside, the SEALs boarded their helos, black figures against the blinding sand. Valkyrie, status? Cole's voice came through the combs. Systems green, she replied, steadying her breath. Ready for launch. Then let's dance. The helos lifted, rotors chopping furiously against the morning stillness. Alex roared down the runway seconds later, her jet tearing into the sky with a sound that made the earth shudder. From up high, the desert looked endless. Dunes stretched like oceans, broken only by jagged ridges and abandoned structures. It was the perfect canvas for chaos. The first 40 minutes unfolded almost too smoothly. Drones appeared on her radar, but Alex swatted them from the sky before they closed within range. The SEALs advanced, fluid and lethal, clearing mock compounds like clockwork. But then everything changed. Her radar flared red. Multiple bogies, fast-moving, unmarked. Not drones this time. Leave jets. Alex's pulse spiked. Overlord, confirm, are we running air threats? Silence, then static. She tried again. Nothing. The comms blackout slammed down like a wall. The SEAL's chatter fuzzed into distortion. She caught fragments, Ramirez cursing, Halle shouting coordinates, but the rest dissolved into white noise. Her Raptor was alone. The enemy jets swept into view, darker and meaner than anything she'd expected for an exercise. Aggressor squadron. Real pilots, real ordnance testing her limits. Copy. We're doing this the hard way, she muttered. Instinct took over. She banked hard, pulling 6 Gs as a missile streaked past her tail. Her HUD screamed warnings, the desert spinning beneath her. She yanked the stick, fired countermeasures, and felt the jolt as flares decoyed another lock. Her heart hammered, but her mind sharpened. This was what she'd been built for. Valkyrie engaging, she said aloud, though no one could hear her. On the ground, the SEALs pushed into a valley when the blackout hit. Gunfire rattled around them more intense than any drill they'd run. Rounds sparked against rock, pinning them down. Where the hell's our air cover? Halle barked, diving behind a boulder. Ramirez cursed. Comes a fried. She can't hear us. Cole stayed calm, even as dust sprayed around him. She knows. If she's worth the legend, she knows. In the sky, Alex fought like a demon. The aggressor jets pressed hard, 3-on-1, their formations tight. Every maneuver risked overload. Every choice carried weight. But she didn't falter. She rolled her Raptor into a climb, baiting one into pursuit, then snapped into a high G turn that slammed her into the seat. Alarms wailed. Her vision blurred at the edges. But the enemy jet overshot, and her cannon ripped it to pieces in a thunderous burst. One down, she whispered, throat raw. The others circled back, smarter now, relentless. On the ground, the SEALs fought through the valley, pinned by heavy fire. Hale's frustration boiled over. She's not coming. We're sitting ducks. Cole snapped his head toward him. Shut it. She's fighting her own war up there. You hold this line until she breaks through, or we're corpses. Something in his tone silenced even Halle. They dug in, returning fire, every man counting seconds like lifetimes. Above them, the sky was chaos. The second jet caught her in a missile lock. She pulled hard, screaming through a canyon so narrow her wingtips nearly kissed rock. The missile detonated against stone, the shockwave rattling her teeth. But she'd made it through. Her HUD flared target in range. She squeezed the trigger, and the second aggressor exploded in a storm of fire. Her body ached, her lungs burned, but she didn't let go. 2 down, she hissed. The third jet circled wide, cautious now. Smarter. Alex gritted her teeth. This one would take everything. Down below, the SEALs were nearly overrun. Gunfire poured from ridge lines, enemy drones circling overhead like vultures. Cole's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and steady. Hold! And then the sky split open. Alex dove in from above, her raptor screaming like thunder incarnate. Cannon fire tore into the ridges, shredding enemy positions. Missiles streaked into the valley, annihilating the drones. The ground lit with fire and smoke, the echoes rolling for miles. The SEALs paused only for a breath long enough to recognize salvation before pushing forward with renewed fury. Ramirez laughed, wild with adrenaline. She's a damn banshee. Even Halle couldn't deny it. She's Valkyrie. The last aggressor came for her head-on, missile bays open. Alex pushed the throttle past limits, every alarm in the cockpit shrieking. The desert blurred into streaks of gold and red as she locked him dead center. Come on, she growled. They closed distance at supersonic speed. At the last instant, she fired. Her missile tore from the bay, colliding with the enemy's in a burst of catastrophic fire. Both jets were caught in the shockwave. Her Raptor shuddered, alarms howling, but she wrestled it back under control, smoke trailing from a wing. When the dust cleared, she was the only one left in the sky. The coms snapped back with a crackle. Valkyrie, status? Cole's voice cut in. She exhaled, chest heaving. Still flying. Threat neutralized. Valley clear. On the ground, the SEALs erupted into a roar of triumph, though not a single cheer made it through the coms. Cole's reply was simple, steady. Copy. Good hunting. Back at base, the debrief was silent at first. The SEALs sat battered, dust-streaked, eyes hollow from exhaustion. Alex walked in, helmet under her arm, her flight suit scorched from heat and strain. Every gaze turned toward her. This time, no one laughed. No one doubted. Halle leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes sharp. You saved our asses. He didn't say it like a compliment. He said it like a truth, undeniable and permanent. Cole gave a rare nod. You flew reckless, he said. But you flew for us. And for the first time, Alex felt the weight of something new pressing in. Not just curiosity, not just tolerance, respect. That night, she sat outside under the stars, body aching, mind replaying every near miss, every heartbeat between life and death. She knew what she had done wasn't perfect. She had risked everything, bent every rule. But she also knew one thing with absolute certainty. The SEALs had tested her. The sky had nearly broken her. But she had survived. And in surviving, she had earned her place. Valkyrie wasn't just a name whispered in disbelief anymore. It was a call sign spoken with reverence. The compound was quieter than usual that evening. The sun bled into the Pacific, casting the sky in bruised shades of orange and red. Most of the SEALs were scattered around the yard, some cleaning weapons, some running through gear checks, others simply sitting with bottles of water and the blank, thoughtful looks of men replaying the day in their heads. Alexandra Hayes walked among them, helmet under her arm, flight suit unzipped at throat. For the first time since stepping foot on this base, she didn't feel the sting of eyes following her like knives. The stares were still there, but different. Less hostile. More curious. She had earned that shift with sweat, blood, and a little recklessness. The debrief had ended hours ago, Cole's voice steady as stone as he recounted the mission's outcome. 3 aggressor birds down. Valley cleared. Package secured. 0 casualties, he had said, gaze sweeping across the room. Then he'd turned to Alex, his tone carrying more weight than before. Valkyrie did more than cover us. She gave us the edge. It was the closest thing to praise she'd heard from him. No one had laughed this time. No muttered doubts, no sharp remarks. Just silence, the kind of silence soldiers give when they're recalibrating how they see someone. Later, while the compound simmered in its post-mission lull, Halle approached her. He was taller than most, broad-shouldered, his face carved from stone. He'd been her sharpest critic since day one. Now he stopped in front of her, arms folded, eyes unreadable. "You almost got yourself killed," he said flatly. Alex met his stare, refusing to flinch. Almost doesn't count. For a beat, the silence stretched. Then, to her surprise, Hale's mouth twitched. Not a smile more like the ghost of one. "You've got guts." Too much, maybe, but... He glanced at the others nearby, then back at her. "You've earned your seat at the table." He walked off without another word, but the weight of his acknowledgement hit harder than any missile lock. That night, the SEALs gathered in the mess hall for chow. It wasn't ceremony, just men and women grabbing trays of food, talking in low voices. Alex hesitated at the door, unsure if stepping inside meant crossing some invisible line. Cole, already seated at the head of a table, caught her pause. He gave a short nod toward an empty seat. "Sit." A single word was enough. She moved through the hall, every step echoing louder in her head than it should have. As she set her tray down, the conversation at the table dipped. Not out of hostility this time, but acknowledgement. Ramirez leaned back, grinning. "So, Valkyrie? You always fly like a bat out of hell. Or was today special?" "Depends," she said, picking up her fork. "You always run into ambushes without looking up. Or was today special?" The table erupted in laughter. Genuine, this time. The tension cracked like glass under pressure. For the first time, she wasn't an intruder in their space. She was one of them. The days that followed solidified the shift. During drills, the SEALs no longer questioned her presence in the sky, they relied on it. When Ramirez shouted for cover, he expected Valkyrie to deliver. When Halle barked coordinates, he trusted her to strike without hesitation. And she did. Again and again. Each run blurred the line between outsider and ally. She wasn't just a pilot anymore. She was part of the team's rhythm. One evening, after a brutal day of joint training, Alex found herself standing at the edge of the obstacle course. The SEALs were running late-night endurance tests, sweat gleaming under the floodlights as they hauled themselves over walls and through mud. Cole walked up beside her, arms crossed, silent for a moment. "They respect you now," he said finally. Alex kept her eyes on the course. "Respect's not permanent. Tomorrow I could screw it up." Cole gave a small grunt. "Respect earned in fire sticks. You proved yourself when the coms went dark. You didn't fold." She looked at him then, catching something in his expression she hadn't expected. Not admiration. Not quite. But trust. Coming from him, it meant more than applause ever could. The real test of her acceptance came 3 nights later. The SEALs had a tradition informal, never spoken of outside the compound. After a successful string of operations, they'd gather around a fire pit near the beach, away from officers and brass, away from rules. It was where stories were told, jokes shared, scars compared. No outsider had ever been invited. That night, Ramirez knocked on her door. "Come on," he said with a grin. "You've earned this." When she followed him to the beach, the flames were already crackling high. The team sat in a loose circle, some nursing beers, others tossing shells into the fire. As Alex approached, the circle shifted, opening space for her. She hesitated, helmet still tucked under her arm. Then she stepped into the light and sat down. Halle handed her a bottle. "Welcome to the fire." The words were simple, but they carried weight heavier than any metal. The night stretched long, filled with laughter, banter, and stories traded like currency. Alex listened more than she spoke, learning the unspoken rules of their brotherhood. When Ramirez asked her about the canyon run, the moment she'd nearly blacked out to dodge a missile, she told it straight, no bravado. The firelight flickered in their eyes as they listened, heads nodding in quiet respect. By the time the flames died low, Alex realized something had changed forever. She wasn't the outcast anymore. She wasn't the exile dragged back by a call sign. She was Valkyrie pilot, shield, and sword. One of them. Later, as the waves whispered against the shore, she stood apart from the circle, helmet cradled in her hands. Across the sand, the seals laughed and argued like family. And for the first time in months, she felt a part of something larger than herself. The loneliness that had haunted her since exile lifted, replaced by a weight of belonging. She whispered to herself, almost like a vow, never again. Never again would she let politics strip her purpose. Never again would she doubt her place. She had flown through fire, and the men who measured worth in blood and grit now stood beside her. And that respect they could never take away. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, spilling gold and rose across the Pacific. The air was crisp, carrying the tang of salt and the distant roar of jet engines warming for the day's exercises. Alexandra Hayes stood on the edge of the flight deck, helmet in hand, her gaze tracing the endless expanse of blue before her. She had come a long way since the day she was thrown off her base, stripped of her wings, and dismissed as trouble. Back then, politics had tried to define her. Now, purpose defined her. Her Raptor sat ready, sleek and gleaming under the morning sun. The control surfaces glimmered like the edges of a blade, waiting to dance. She could feel it in her bones. This wasn't just a training exercise anymore. It was the culmination of everything she had fought for. The SEALs transport helos touched down, one by one, rolling toward the edge of the deck. The team filed out, gear clanking, boots solid against metal. Their faces were familiar, now no longer skeptical or doubtful. They carried an unspoken bond forged in fire, precision, and trust. Halle walked up to her first, expression unreadable, but there was something soft in his eyes. "Ready to do this?" Alex gave a small smile, adjusting her flight gloves. "Always," Ramirez gave her a grin, clapping her on the shoulder. "Don't make us look bad. Don't worry," she replied. "You'll be fine." The mission was simple in theory. Secure an offshore communications tower, disable hostile signals, and extract the SEALs under aerial cover. But simple was never how she operated. The challenge was designed to test both the SEALs' teamwork and her instinctive flying. As she climbed into the cockpit, the familiar hum of the Raptor enveloped her. The HUD lit up, the radar humming, systems green. Muscle memory took over. She was one with the jet again, each control, each lever an extension of herself. She felt the old thrill, sharp as lightning, the kind that had made her Valkyrie. The SEALs deployed first, moving toward the target under the early light. Drones appeared almost immediately autonomous, fast and deadly. Valkyrie's fingers danced over the throttle and weapon systems, missiles streaking from her wings with lethal precision. Her voice over the comms was calm, measured. Threat neutralized. Continue forward. The operators pressed on, exfil route clear. But the simulation introduced a surprise. A sudden hostile patrol, moving in unpredictable patterns, and the helos were too slow to evade. Alex banked sharply, weaving between radar locks, firing missiles and flares with uncanny timing. Her movements were impossible to predict, flawless yet audacious. On the ground, the SEALs' eyes widened as they realized Valkyrie was doing more than covering them. She was shaping the battlefield. "She's a ghost," Ramirez muttered. Halle growled in agreement, a rare smile flickering across his face. As they neared the communications tower, enemy drones swarmed in concentrated numbers, and radar signals flickered with jamming attempts. Alex's comms stayed steady, each instruction delivered with clarity. "Left flank compromised," she said. "Evasive roll. Missile impact in 3, 2, 1. The missiles hit with precision, destroying the threat before the SEALs even had to react. Eyes clear, Cole's voice came, calm, authoritative. "Move to objective." Alex's pulse raced with controlled adrenaline. Every maneuver, every decision, was instinctual. She wasn't just flying the jet. She was controlling the battlefield, a force that demanded respect. The SEALs reached the tower, and within minutes, the operation was complete. No casualties, flawless execution, and all objectives met. But the real triumph was something less measurable. As the team boarded the helos for exfil, they looked to the sky and saw Valkyrie's Raptor circling above, wings slicing the air like a sentinel. Every eye in the formation followed her, a silent acknowledgement of her skill and courage. Even Halle, who had doubted her from the start, spoke softly to Ramirez. "She's one of us now, not just a pilot, not just a protector. One of them." Back at the base, debriefing was different this time. There was no questioning her methods, no disbelief in her abilities. Instead, the SEALs recounted her actions with reverence. "She didn't just cover us," Ramirez said. "She led us." Cole nodded, voice steady but tinged with something like admiration. The Air Force lost an asset. The Navy found a legend. Alex listened, feeling a swell of pride, but also something deeper, a sense of belonging she had never known before. Later that evening, the team gathered again around the fire pit on the beach, ritual and tradition merging with the quiet roar of the Pacific. This time, the circle didn't open for her. She stepped in freely. She was part of it now. Halle passed her a bottle, the first true gesture of camaraderie he had offered. "Welcome home," he said simply. Alex looked around the circle. These were warriors who had lived through hell and back, men and women who measured worth in blood, grit, and trust. They weren't impressed by rank or medals. They were impressed by action, by instinct, by courage. And today, she had earned all of it. She raised her bottle, meeting each gaze. "To the mission," she said. "And to the team." "To the team," they echoed, voices steady, resolute. In the days that followed, Alexandra Hayes Valkyrie became more than a name whispered across hangars or in briefing rooms. She became a symbol. For new pilots, she was the legend of the Raptor who flew blind yet undefeated. For the SEALs, she was the shield in the sky, the edge they could rely on when the world tilted toward chaos. She had returned from exile, not just to reclaim her wings, but to carve a place in history, one that no bureaucracy could erase. Her call sign was no longer just a nickname. It was a legacy. And for the first time in her life, Alexandra Hayes didn't feel like the outcast. She was Valkyrie. And legends, she realized, were never forgotten.